Chapter 21, Chapter 19. Tom breathed a huge sigh of relief as the small wooden boat finally hit the rocky surface of the small island in the middle of the cavern. After stealing Hufflepuff's cup, he had taken a few weeks to assimilate with the Horcrux, foreign memories pounding in his mind as he painstakingly searched and sorted through them. It was hard to believe he had not sensed himself growing insane. Even in the memories, Tom could see how he was quicker to anger, acting more and more on impulse instead of strategy and intelligence. At least he had a second chance. Not many others could say the same. Like the Inferi in this cave. When he had thought himself ready, Tom had immediately set off to acquire one of his last Horcruxes, Slytherin's locket, from the cave near the beach he used to visit as a child. He had to admit, although the protections seemed excessive, they were quite the deterrent. Even he felt ill at ease drifting over a lake full to the brim of reanimated dead. He had lost his taste for necromancy, that was for sure. Stepping out of the boat, Tom brushed his pants down before he made his way over to the stone basin. The poison in it lit up its surroundings in an ominous green light, and for just one morbid second Tom wondered what it would be like to drink it, to be confronted with pure undulated despair. Instead, he pulled out the salamander he had brought with him for that specific purpose. He had no doubt he could dismantle his own curse, but the thought of alerting his counterpart made him wary. Of course, Voldemort was probably in no fit state to investigate his Horcruxes anyway, but as always it's better to be safe than sorry. So Tom started the arduous time-consuming task of feeding the salamander the potion bit by tiny bit. Tom quickly tired of the process. He supposed it would be better if he was feeding it to a muggle, so he could see the effects of the potion, but as it were he was now simply bored, and cold, and tired of standing in this stupid cave. Feeding the salamander the last drop of poison, Tom killed it quickly so it wouldn't set off any traps and dropped it to the cave floor. He edged closer to the basin and peered down into it, a foreboding feeling growing in his chest. It certainly looked like his locket, overly garish and clunky in the dim light, but it didn't feel like it. Whenever Tom was near his Horcruxes, he was filled with a pleasant sort of warmth, as if he had finally been reunited with something he had lost long ago. This locket didn't feel like anything but a clump of metal. Picking it up and threading the chain through his hands, Tom studied it curiously. Perhaps without any ambient magic to feed on, it had gone silent. The cup certainly hadn't been up to conversation, unlike the smarmy diadem. But both of those objects radiated magic. This didn't. Running his hands over the metal again, Tom tried to open it and blinked in surprise when the clasp came undone. It shouldn't have come undone. Panic building in his veins, Tom tore it open and grabbed at the deceivingly innocent note sitting in it. To the Dark Lord, I know I will be dead long before you read this, but I want you to know that it was I who discovered your secret. I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can. I face death in the hope that when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more. R.A.B. buggering fucking bastard. Eliza winced as a sharp pain seared down her scar and rubbed her face soothingly until the pain faded. Are you okay? Daphne asked, peering at her from across the table. Yes, Eliza said, cracking a grin. It's just that the boy whose soul I'm connected to has anger issues, and whenever he's pissed, I get a backlash of pain. But she didn't say that. Instead, she said, I'm fine. Daphne didn't look like she believed her, which was fair, really. Eliza did have a track record of keeping huge life-changing pieces of information from her court, even if she was trying to get better at that. Are you worried about Pettigrew's trial tomorrow? Blaze questions, sipping his pumpkin juice. Eliza made a so-so gesture. You know Eliza, Blaze. She's a fatalist at heart, Draco said, and Eliza shot him a glare, leveling her fork at him threateningly. I'm not a fatalist if I'm always right. Draco pulled a face but nodded in concession. I can't imagine the actual trial going wrong, Theo chimes in. It's just a matter of who interferes afterwards. They all take a moment to glare at the headmaster before Eliza shrugs elegantly, something she no doubt picked up from Draco. I'm not overly worried about interference. Once Sirius is cleared, there's absolutely nothing stopping him from adopting me straight away. Of course, if I had been placed with a wizarding family, his action could be contested, but I was left in a muggle orphanage. I can't imagine the Wisengamot could actually do anything about it. Eliza explains, brushing her wayward hair out of her face. It just kept getting longer and longer. Muggles had much better baubles than wizards. Well, we all know that most rules don't seem to apply to Dumbledore, Draco said bitterly. Now don't be such a defeatist, Draco. Blaise tutted and ducked when Draco flicked a pea at him across the table. Daphne hummed quietly in thought. So we have a fatalist, a realist, and a defeatist. Who's the optimist? The silence itself was telling. Optimism comes to Hogwarts to die, Theo eventually said darkly, and Eliza couldn't help but burst into pealing laughter. The other Slytherins looked over towards their court and smiled warmly at the sight. They had all been a lot closer since the Astara ritual. Some were calmer and more even-tempered like Eliza. Others smiled more even under the oppressing effects of the Dementors, and Eliza was unbelievably happy that she made it happen. She couldn't do a lot right, but at least she could do right by them. The next day, Eliza woke up to a concerning piece of news. It came, as most travesties did, in the form of the Daily Prophet. Mincitory missteps, the headline read, Biggest Blunder of the Century by Rita Skeeter. Eliza was already cringing, and she hadn't even read it yet. This couldn't entail anything good, as we all know yesterday was the severely belated trial of Peter Pettigrew for the indirect murder of the Potters, the murder of 12 innocent muggles, and obstruction to justice, which ended in Sirius Black being wrongfully accused and thrown into Azkaban for 12 years. For more on Sirius Black, see page 6. For more on the Potters, page 7. I, as many others, attended the trial in hopes of finally seeing justice being served. Pettigrew attempted to plead not guilty, and at first adamantly refused to be dosed with Veritaseum, which to me at least clearly spoke for itself. When Severus Snape, the youngest ever potions master, ladies and gentlemen, was called to the stand, as a witness, Pettigrew quickly changed his tune. It was a heart-wrenching experience, dear readers, to know that for so many years we have all been thoroughly deceived. Peter Pettigrew betrayed the Potters. He framed innocent Sirius Black, who lost his friends and his freedom in the span of hours. Pettigrew murdered 12 muggles as he escaped and transformed into his illegal animagus form, a rat, and disappeared into the sewers. Whilst Sirius Black was in Azkaban, whilst his goddaughter, the last remaining Potter, grew up alone and abandoned by the wizarding world, Pettigrew lived as a treasured family pet in a wizarding family. Skeeter really had done a good job there, reminding the public of the connection between her and Sirius, already rallying sympathies for the pair of them. Eliza was going to have to give her a raise. The wizarding family in question has requested to remain anonymous, but I have been reassured they have been compensated thoroughly. As well as that, all charges against Sirius Black were waived. Yes, dear readers, Sirius Black has been declared innocent of all crimes. If you're reading this, Mr. Black, know that all of us here at the Daily Prophet wish you well. The trial continued, and Peter Pettigrew was sentenced to the Dementor's kiss. And I wish, my readers, I wish I could have finished this article here with a happy ending. That was not the case. We trust in our ministry to protect, and yet, in fixing the blunder they committed 12 years ago, they have yet again made another foolish, horrible mistake. As Pettigrew was escorted out of the room by 2 auras, he escaped. The paper Eliza was holding burst into flames. Thea vanished it calmly and handed her another copy, apparently expecting that reaction from her. Did he have inside help? Are the ministry solely to blame? And will we ever see justice be served for the travesty that racked our country 12 years ago? This has been Rita Skeeter delivering the truth to you. I can't believe he escaped, Blaise said incredulously, and Eliza tossed the paper back to Theo. I'm not surprised, Draco said sullenly. Fatalist. Daphne quipped, realist. Draco responded, shaking the paper. Theo rolled his eyes, interrupting their bickering, and flung his arm around Eliza, bringing her in for an unexpected hug. Congratulations, Eliza, he murmured. He's free. Sirius was free. Eliza swallowed around the lump in her throat and returned Theo's hug. She would finally be free. She'd never have to go back to the orphanage ever again. She could almost cry. Sirius had left Hogwarts grounds a few days ago, determined to be in London when the trial took place so he could get acquitted as soon as possible. Eliza knew he would be running around London this very second, gathering everything he would need. He'd clear his name at the ministry, get his compensation, as if money made up for a decade in Azkaban, Never mind that the blacks were filthy rich anyway. She knew the first thing he would do would be to get a new wand, then to Gringotts to access his money and estates under his name. So it surprised her that, between all of that, the man had managed to send her a letter. Pup, it read, "You've done it. Merlin, you creepy little genius, you've done it. I'm free. Make sure to thank all those little Slytherin friends of yours. I have no doubt that the reason my acquittal was so fast was thanks to older Malfoy pulling some strings. Maybe he's not so bad. I know you've probably found out from your friends, or maybe you even read The Prophet this time, even if you hate it, but I just had to tell you myself. I've just bought myself a new wand, and I'm eating a very mature breakfast of Fortescue's ice cream as I write this, and let me tell you people's faces when they see me. I've never got through a crowd so quick in my life. I'm going to go to Gringotts after this to sort out a few matters and look at my estates. I know for a fact there's a townhouse in London, the Black Ancestral Home. If you agreed to help me redecorate, I'd consider living there. It's a bit too macabre for my tastes right now. I wouldn't consider moving back in usually, but I know how much you were salivating for a chance to see the library. Plus, it would be one giant middle finger to dear old dead mother anyway, pup. I'm gonna get you out of that orphanage as fast as I can. By the time summer comes, you'll be living with me. Love you, pup. Serious Eliza delicately folded up the letter and pretended her eyes weren't burning. Sirius was going to take her away from the orphanage, and she would kill anyone that got in her way. In the midst of everything that had happened, Eliza had honestly forgotten about the searing pain in her scar. But the day after Pettigrew's grand escape, Tom forcibly reminded Eliza of his presence by sending her a package. As the owls swooped in early that morning, Eliza dropped her apple when a great, big, mean-looking eagle owl landed on their table with a heavy thump. Leveling her with an amber-eyed glare, it stuck its leg out affronted, and Eliza hurriedly untied the package and the corresponding letter. The owl clacked its beak in a threatening manner before flying off. It was a bit of a prick, really, just like its owner. Mum says hello, and that she wants you to know if you want to murder Sirius, we have a flower bed for the body and a bedroom for you, Draco says, opening up his own mail. I love your mum, Eliza responds immediately, curiously opening her own letter. I know, Draco says, sounding resigned. Eliza didn't know why he was bothered. Narcissa was amazing. Dear little star, Horcrux hunting is not going particularly well, mostly because it seems I'm not the first to have the idea. Someone has stolen Slytherin's locket. I won't give up just yet. I'm giving myself until the summer holidays to find it, and if not, I will simply move on to absorbing the diadem. I'm already operating on more of a soul than my counterpart, which will perfectly suffice for my plans. But I didn't write this letter for that. In fact, I believe some congratulations are in order, aren't they, darling? You'll finally be out of that orphanage for good, and if that black doesn't treat you right, just say the word. I'll kidnap you for the summer, and no one will ever find us if that's what you want. That being said, I hope it doesn't come to that. You deserve a real home, little star. I know both of us consider Hogwarts a home, but trust me, nothing beats that feeling of finally not living out of your bloody suitcase. To celebrate your impending success, I decided to send you a gift, have a celebratory toast in my honor, yours. Tom. P.S. If I happen to bump into Pettigrew on my travels, I will be sure to kill him for you, darling. Perhaps my next gift could be his head on a pike. Is that your bow? Says Draco this time, and Eliza pretends she doesn't notice when he and Daphne high-five across the table. Yes, Eliza says, unwrapping the package curiously. He said if he had chance he would mail me Pettigrew's head on a spike. How romantic, Blaise says dryly, and Eliza glares at them all as they snicker. Tom wasn't romantic. Tom was an overprotective homicidal maniac she happened to have an unbreakable vow with. There was clearly a difference. What did he send you today, then? Theo asked, peering over the top of his book. I don't know, Eliza said, as she struggled to open the box. He said I should make a toast, so I guess a goblet. Oh. He wouldn't. Tearing open the packaging, Eliza yanked out a heavy, ornate golden goblet and plunked it on the table. Is that? It is, Blaise cut off, Daphne staring at the cup on the table. Eliza grinned maniacally, and then reached for the jug of orange juice she had convinced the elves to start leaving at the Slytherin table. Eliza Lily Potter, don't you dare use one of the Founder's heirlooms as a Morgana damned drinking cup, Daphne hissed, as Eliza happily poured orange juice into the glass, filling it to the brim as she tried to contain her laughter. "To Sirius Black," she cheered, raising the cup high into a toast. "Merlin's balls," someone screeched. "Probably Roman. Potter is that Hufflepuff's cup." Eliza took another leisurely slip of her juice and watched as the hall fell into chaos. All in all, considering the start of the month had started in chaos, the rest of April followed at a rather sedate pace. She attended classes, time traveled to attend more classes, time traveled to take a nap between classes, and attended to her court and her house. She exchanged letters with Sirius, who was slowly but surely revamping Grimmauld Place, letters with Narcissa and Lucius, who were adamant that she kept in touch, and of course her sporadic pen-pal letters with Tom, who was trying to track down his missing locket. The only excitement came from Professor Lupin cornering her one day after a defense class. "You knew," he had said, looking far older than he was. "I did," Eliza had returned evenly. "Why didn't tell you me?" He asked, and Eliza couldn't tell if he was sad she didn't trust him or sad that after all those years he had left his friend to rot in Azkaban. "And what would you have done?" He had nothing to say to that, and so Eliza had walked out. For Sirius' sake, she hoped the odd professor finally came around. It would do Sirius good to have an old friend around. It was after the Easter holidays, and really, Easter, that things predictably went wrong. It began, as it always did, with a summons from the headmaster. Although Eliza was very tempted to simply send the note back with a cordial no thanks, she knew it was better to show up. Although her relationship with the headmaster was tense and there was suspicion on both sides, it was still somewhat workable. He saw her as a petulant child, not a normal one certainly, but still a reluctant hero who would stop Voldemort. The closer she kept an eye on him and reinforced that image, the safer she would be. So reinforcing her occlumency shields, Eliza walked to his office, the gargoyle immediately leaping away from the door so she could climb the stairs. Rapping her knuckles sharply on the door, she waited until she heard a soft "come in" before she pushed inside. Dumbledore's office was just as ludicrous as the last time she had been in, cluttered with mismatched whirring objects and junk. Eliza slid into the seat across from the headmaster and barely covered her grimace of distaste. "Lemon drop?" he asked, and Eliza politely refused, whilst happily imagining the old man choking to death on one of those infernal sweets. "Now, Eliza," he said, peering at her over half-moon glasses, "I think we both know why I asked you up here today. Is it about Sirius Black, sir?" she asked respectfully, but still maintained her aloofness. For any other Slytherin, it would be the normal reaction. Even with all the facades she had ran before on Dumbledore, this tone was still familiar. It must remind him of a young Tom Riddle. It definitely reminded her. "Now, my dear girl, I understand your life has been difficult." His voice was kind. Eliza just couldn't believe in it. "But as your magical guardian, I implore you to reconsider letting Sirius claim guardianship over you. He's simply not stable enough. You may be my magical guardian headmaster." Eliza cut in smoothly, keeping her tone even. "But you have never once shown any interest in my living conditions before now." If she didn't know better, she would have sworn she could see a flash of guilt. "Sirius has been cleared by professionals as a fully functioning member of society, as long as he takes his prescribed potions. Be that as it may, dear girl, I understand you are simply worried about a student's safety, headmaster." Eliza interrupted with a false, sympathetic tone. "But Sirius is adopting me through Muggle means. You can interfere and take my case to the Wisengamot, but a word of advice, headmaster," Eliza said, rising from her chair. "You're not the only one with friends in high places." Eliza swept out of the office in her best imitation of Severus and directly started to walk to the owlery. She would have to send a letter to Sirius and let him know what Dumbledore was up to. If Dumbledore decided to take the case of her guardianship to court, it meant the old fool was no longer willing to play fair. That didn't bother Eliza too much anyway. She always preferred fighting dirty. Unfortunately, Hedwig hadn't arrived in time to stop a conflict between Dumbledore and Sirius. That was okay, though, Eliza thought as she read the letter, because the confrontation sounded hilarious. "Pup, I don't get the impression that Dumbledore thinks I'm a good role model. He called me today, saying I should consider what's best for you. He thinks I'm going to corrupt you or something." "I can't blame him that much, really. You know what they all say, never trust a black. I got annoyed with his for the greater good spiel anyway, and so I doused the fire, poured water right on top of his head. Needless to say, I don't think he's pleased, pup. I think he'll try and contest us in court. I would say not to worry, but I have a feeling you already have a plan yours. Serious, the next day another letter arrives for Eliza, bearing the ministry seal. Dumbledore was contesting Sirius' claim to guardianship in front of the Wisengamot. The court date was set for May 16th. The headmaster met Eliza's eyes from across the hall. Her move. Severus, acting in loco parentis considering Eliza was currently resting in guardianship limbo, had granted her permission to attend the last Hogsmeade trip of the year with a sour look and a mild, "Don't make me regret this." Her court were ecstatic to drag her around Hogsmeade, and they in turn had to forcibly drag her away from Honeydukes. It was sometimes concerning how much of a sweet tooth she had. As the afternoon dragged on, however, Eliza had to reluctantly part from them. She was here on business after all. Ducking into the 3 broomsticks, Eliza waved her court goodbye as she weaved her way to the table in the back corner of the bar. Sirius, Eliza greeted warmly, sliding into the booth next to the man. Sirius had instantly lit up when he spotted her, a bright smile crossing his face. He looked much better than he had last time she had seen him. His hair was now cut, and even, he was still pale but no longer sickly, and instead of rags, he was wearing some very expensive fitted robes. She thought there would always simply just be something missing behind his eyes, however. Azkaban took more than just the freedom of its prisoners. Sirius made an aborted movement, but seeing her tense, he simply settled an arm over the top of the booth, shuffling closer to her. "It's good to see you, pup. You too." Eliza responded kindly and returned to watching the door as they waited for their guest. "Have you ever had butterbeer before?" Sirius asked, uncorking a bottle and setting it down in front of her. Eliza grinned mischievously before taking a sip of the drink. "We smuggle it into the Slytherin Commons." Sirius let out a loud bark of laughter that had the occupants of the pub turning to them curiously before quickly averting their gaze. Eliza continued to tell Sirius about how she had set up a rota in Slytherin so that every Hogsmeade trip other students smuggled things into the castle for the whole house. She had just finished telling Sirius about the time Severus had walked in on them when they were trying to stash crates of butterbeer behind a tapestry when their guest joined them. "Miss Skeeter," Eliza smiled pleasantly to the blonde, extending a hand and making sure both her earrings were on show. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman behind those brilliant articles." Eliza Potter, Skeeter responded in kind. "It's an honor to meet my best benefactor. Now I'm sure you've heard the news, Miss Skeeter," Eliza said cordially. "Ah, yes, the court case," Skeeter said knowingly, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Exactly. As you've probably gathered, I wish to remain with Sirius," Eliza said, gesturing to the man who was watching their rapport slack-jawed. "He probably wasn't used to Slytherin machinations, and I want your help." "And what would I get out of it?" Skeeter asks, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow, eyeing Sirius curiously. "How about exclusive interviewing access to the girl who lived?" Skeeter smiled a shark-like grin, and Eliza knew she mirrored it exactly. She wasn't a Slytherin for nothing. "I didn't know you had that in you, pup," Sirius said when Skeeter finally left them, notepad filled to the brim and a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Slytherin," Eliza responds, pointing at herself before turning her finger onto Sirius. "But you really did surprise me. I would have thought you Gryffindors knew nothing about playing your audience." "Ah, but I'm a black," Sirius says as they slip out of the pub walking down the street back to Hogwarts, "and we always get what we want." The vehemence in his tone would have been startling if he hadn't immediately leant down to ruffle Eliza's hair. "Do you think it will be enough?" Eliza asks as they near the Hogwarts gates. "Pup, I know it will." Sirius' belief in her was heartwarming and immediately settled her doubts. She had never truly doubted herself before this, but before Sirius, Eliza had never really felt like she had anything to lose. She had grown up with nothing. There was no price to ever be paid. She had never wanted anything more than this. She wouldn't let it go. The next day, Eliza walked into the hall with her court and laughed happily when breakfast appeared on the table. Her usual plate of strawberries had been replaced with a tiny single cupcake with Slytherin green frosting. No one knew besides her and the house elves, but May 3RD was now her new birthday thanks to all the time travel. She was now 14. Of course, she'd celebrate as normal on July 31st, but she made a mental note to thank the house elves for commemorating her new birthday. Her court all gave her strange looks, but none of them asked. They had tried before earlier in the year to find out what Eliza was doing to attend all her classes, but when Eliza had explained it was a ministry secret, they had stopped pestering. She was sure they would bring it up again soon. Eliza had just taken the first bite of her cupcake when the owls flooded into the hall. Not even sparing a moment, Eliza immediately stole Theo's copy of the Daily Prophet, seeing a picture of herself on the front page. She was sat in the Three Broomsticks. Sirius sat next to her with an arm around her shoulder as they both clanked their bottles of butterbeer together. They looked like the ideal happy family. Girl Who Lived speaks at last by Rita Skeeter, as you may already know Eliza Potter. Girl Who Lived, heir to the most noble house of Potter and heir to the most noble and ancient house of Black, is now currently in her 3rd year at Hogwarts. I've had the pleasure of talking to Eliza Potter before now, and I, alongside many others, commend the intelligence and empathy of the 3rd-year Slytherin girl. What you may not know, my dear readers, is of the life Eliza Potter has lived, the happy ending she has almost found, and the threat that Albus Dumbledore poses to it. As we all know, Sirius Black has been declared innocent on all charges, and after 13 long years, he is finally ready to be reunited with his goddaughter. Albus Dumbledore has interfered with this union. The court date challenging the guardianship is set for the 16th May. As always, I try and seek the truth, dear readers, and so I approached Eliza Potter to see what was happening myself. Eliza, as she has given me permission to call her, has told me she wishes to be treated as any other girl, ordinary besides her status as the girl who lived. But in these pressing times, she has finally decided to break her 13 years' silence and speak to the wizarding world at last. What follows is a truly enlightening conversation. So Miss Potter, EO, please call me Eliza R. Eliza then, let's start with easy questions. How are you doing at Hogwarts? EO, it's simply brilliant. She lights up here as she talks of Hogwarts. Her passion is truly hard to ignore, my readers, and I found myself being pulled into her words. Hogwarts is like the home I've never had. The Slytherins are my family. I have my best friends with me, Draco, Theo, Daphne, and Blaise. I'm taking all the subjects that are offered, actually, and although Eliza remained bashful when accounting her life at Hogwarts, I feel I must tell you that she is the top student in her year, in every subject she is taking. My dear readers, this girl is truly exceptional. And what do you like to do for fun, Eliza? I like to read, she confesses quietly. I also like flying like my father did. It is easy to forget this happy girl grew up in the wake of a tragedy, but seeing the longing, wistful look on her face reminds me of what she has lost. And how about you, Lord Black? How have you been enjoying your freedom? Sorting things out for this little imp, he says fondly, smiling at his goddaughter. I've been fixing up the Black ancestral home so I can teach Eliza about her family history. Eliza seems to light up at the prospect. And so where have you been staying all these years, Eliza? I ask finally. The girl goes strangely quiet, a sharp contrast to the bubbly girl I was speaking to. Lord Black rests a comforting hand on her shoulder as she nervously fiddles with her butterbeer. My magical guardian first placed me with my mother's relatives, the Dursleys. Pause. They didn't like me very much, dear readers. My heart broke. One day they dropped me off at a Muggle orphanage, readers. I will not go into detail of Eliza's life at the orphanage out of respect of her privacy, but I will say this. It is no life a child should have to suffer through, especially a magical one. And that's why Sirius is going to adopt me, she said, brightening. He said he's got our ancestral home ready, and there's a library, and I can have my own bedroom and everything. It was heartbreaking that such basic things made her so incredible happy. I know Headmaster Dumbledore thinks he's protecting me, but I have Sirius to do that for me now. I don't want to leave him, and you won't have to, pup, Black says, offering comfort, and bringing the girl into a hug. James made me her godfather, he says, speaking to me. I've already missed so much of her life. I want to do right by the memory of my best mate. I want to do right by Eliza. It's obvious how much those two cared for each other, even after all these years apart. Eliza Potter is an exceptional girl who deserves to finally have a family, the last of her family left. And yet Albus Dumbledore would leave her to wallow in a run-down Muggle orphanage, suffering. I only ask you this, my dear readers. Are we going to let this treatment stand? This has been Rita Skeeter, bringing the truth to you. Eliza smirked dangerously as she threw the paper back onto the table. You've really outdone yourself with this one, Eliza, Draco says as he flicks through his own paper. I particularly like the reference to your father, the comments dryly, knowing full well what Eliza's feelings about her parents were. Well, I quite enjoyed dear Rita's embellishments, Blaze says, before dramatically bringing his hands to his chest, and in a simpering tone, the longing, wistful look reminds me of all she has lost. Eliza snorts and whacks him over the head with her rolled-up newspaper. Dumbledore's going to have a hard time fighting the public outcry about this, Daphne said, scanning the paper again. Eliza smirks again and turns to the head table when she feels a stare boring into the side of her head. Dumbledore's blue eyes are staring at her from across the hall, but Eliza simply quirks an eyebrow as if to say, "Your move." Eliza got special permission to leave the Hogwarts ground on the day of her trial, although her time turner was confiscated for the day to make sure no tampering would occur. That was fine with Eliza. She didn't need time on her side when she was sure she was already going to win. She flew directly into the ministry atrium from Severus' office, stumbling slightly as she made her way out of the fireplace. She didn't think she'd ever get used to that. Pop. Sirius greeted her happily, ruffling her hair much to her irritation. Listen, I've got to make my way to the court, but Lucius and Sissy have agreed to sit in the stands with you, he chirped, and Eliza turned on her heel to see the Malfoys standing a few meters away. Narcissa waved at her elegantly, and Eliza shot her a grin before turning back to Sirius. We're going to do this, Eliza said strongly, meeting Sirius' eyes. Sirius nodded in response, determination set on his face, and something else that Eliza couldn't quite place. Of course we will, pup. Now let's do this. Sirius walked away, trailing after a portly-looking wizard who was acting as their representative, and Eliza headed straight for the Malfoys, sharing small talk as they made their way to the stands. The custody battle was an open trial. Eliza had insisted on it. The public sympathy was what would win Eliza this case. The custody battle was not subject to the whole Wisengamot's approval. The only person they had to convince was the minister, or whoever he chose as his representative, who appeared to be Amelia Bones. That was good. Eliza knew Madame Bones was a fair woman. Settling into her seat between both Lucius and Narcissa, Eliza observed the court quietly. Madame Bones was sat at the bench. Sirius was already present, conversing softly with his attorney. The room was filled with reporters and lords and ladies from the Wisengamot, even though they held no vote over this particularly trial. Eliza exchanged nods with the Parkinsons and those few she had managed to make acquaintances with at the Malfoy Yule Ball. Barely a minute before the hearing was about to start, Dumbledore burst into the room in all his obnoxious robed glory. Settling across from Sirius, he smiled kindly at Madame Bones, who cleared her throat and finally started the trial. May 16, 1994, custody battle of Eliza Lily Potter, she announced. Eliza listened onto the proceedings curiously, keeping an eye on the reactions of the viewers, particularly the journalists who all stood in the stands. If he could damage Dumbledore's reputation while she was here, it could only be a bonus. Eliza scoffed when Dumbledore tried to contest Sirius' guardianship by citing his mental instability. Knowing ahead of time which excuses Dumbledore was likely to use, Eliza had Sirius approach his healers from St. Mungo's, who gladly agreed to testify. Eliza smirked softly when Dumbledore's eyes shuttered at the news of Sirius having a full cleared bill of health. He and Sirius argued back and forth for a while before Dumbledore cut in. Be that as it may, I'm sure Eliza had friends, a family, back at the orphanage. Surely it would be wrong to rip her away so cruelly. Dumbledore spoke kindly, although Eliza was pleased to note the undercurrent of tension in his voice. Well, why don't you ask her? Sirius bit out, ever the Gryffindor. Silence followed his words for a few moments, and Madame Bones seemed to ponder the question before nodding decisively. Calling Eliza Potter to testify, Eliza breathed in deeply, concealing a smile with a nervous look as she made her way to the floor. This truly couldn't have gone better. Adjusting the grey blazer of her suit, Eliza took her place at the witness stand, standing tall. First impressions mattered. If people saw her as an emotional girl, hysterical and easily manipulated, if she lost her temper and appeared petulant, she would be helping Dumbledore's case. Instead, that morning, she had pinned her hair back with the help of Daphne and slipped into a formal suit. She purposely ignored how familiar that action had felt. She stood proud and determined. She would be respectful and play her cards exactly R-I-T-N-D, then she would win. Miss Eliza Potter. Yes, Madam Bones, Eliza responded, inclining her head. Would you care to tell us, in your own words, what life at your current place of residence was like, and why you wish Sirius Black to take guardianship over you? Eliza breathed in deeply, and then began to speak calm and steady. She informed them all about her life at the orphanage. She spoke about growing up in second-hand clothes with rationed food. She spoke of the bullying she suffered in those first few horrible years, and of her bedroom with mold crawling up the walls and a leaky window. She told them how accidental magic used to be punishable sin. I never knew my parents. Before I went to Hogwarts, I had only ever had myself. I have friends now. Best friends and I consider them family, but Eliza speaks purposely faltering. Sirius was my parents' best friend. He loves me. He wants to give me an actual home. A home where I can have my own bedroom and see my friends all summer and do all those normal things like have family dinners and play Quidditch on summer days. I'd be going to a place where I know I'd be loved. Eliza finishes and pretends not to notice how that speech rings a bit too true. Please don't deny me that Eliza met Dumbledore's eyes from across the room. Checkmate. The rest of the hearing passed quickly after that, and soon Madame Bones stood in the stand to make a decision. Custody of Eliza Lily Potter is granted to Sirius Orion Black, she declared strongly, and Eliza didn't waste a moment before she was running down to meet Sirius, slamming into his chest as he wrapped his arms around her. It was a tense hug, their first one. Eliza still wasn't used to them much, and Sirius obviously had no idea what to do with her. It was vaguely uncomfortable, and everyone was looking at them, and she thinks Sirius might be crying. It's not a nice hug. But right now it's more than enough for her. The rest of the year passes in a blur after that. The day she returned from the ministry, the Slytherins throw one of the biggest celebrations Eliza had ever seen. Even Severus showed up, and much to Eliza's delight, at least half of the Slytherins crowed, "Uncle Save," very loudly when he entered the room. She was overjoyed to find that nickname had caught on.